Okay, on the show today, Olivier Gutelek. It's fucking Dutch. I can't say it, but he does cool movement stuff. Strong movement background, very interesting movement teacher. Olivier, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. A nice, very nice pronunciation.
Yeah, perfect, right?
Very
Do you want to,
creative.
do you want to say how it's meant to be said?
Something like so it actually means good luck, but you can say it in yeah, you can say
That
it in that way as well.
that is a cool name. It literally means good luck. Yeah, it actually means good luck. Wow, that's a cool name.
I'm I'm happy with it.
How did you get interested in what you do now? Let's hear a bit about your story.
Um, well, f first of all, I think I was rebelling against my university degree in business and economics. And as soon as I started trying out for like a management position, I realized after 2 months, this is not it. So I started initially some kind of sports business work, creating basketball camps for kids, all the way to professional players in that sport. Then I got started with like a performance gym. So I got into all of the hard style training,
Okay.
pushing myself to the
Right.
limit in the physical sense. Mm, and then I kind of got bored after a while with training, like only training without too much meaning behind it. So I think I started looking to the whole interconnected web of emotions and the mind and the body, and why I was holding certain tensions, or why everybody came to train during the evening, and then after the gym closed, people would come with their other questions or other problems. So I started, I always liked digging. So I think I just started with the most base approach to the body, which was sports and training, and then started digging deeper into the more emotional, psychophysical layers. And I never really stopped. So that's kind of my track record, you could say.
Your trajectory. And what do you generally do now? Is it workshops, coaching? What's your general activity now?
Now it's mostly coaching. So rather than going to the gym, I go with people to the park to also have the affirmation of the not so linear environment of nature. I find very important. And then I also work online doing coaching, more the somatic work I do through the online tools. And then I still work with kids. That's more like explicit, more working in the domain of athletic development, but then also teaching the kids about self-regulation and self-awareness, and not only pushing themselves. So there I'm called the play perform coach. So I try to keep the balance between those two. And then I do some workshops where the people that want to go deeper into all of this, that they can have like a weekend or 3-day experience and really dive in all the different tools that are there that can bring them closer to themselves.
And what do you love doing at the moment? What's really your sort of joy kind of zone at the moment?
Right now it's I've been working a lot with dreams. So I've been writing my dreams down for like the last 6 7 years, and through that I've seen that like the language of the dream, or the language of image, is something that really fascinates me right now. And this connects really well with the work with the body, because what I see when I work with people more on a more aware level with the body, or on a slower level, or somatic work, I noticed that people started talking in images much more, or in metaphors. So that material of the dream, like you could say a situation where somebody says that they are being pulled back, or they're feeling not very stable, or they're too much in their head. If I listen to people's words, often we don't really get anywhere. But if I listen to the meaning or the images behind those words, I can step into the image with them, but I can also use those images to create movement games. So I would actually work pulling people back and finding new ways to deal
Okay,
with those
wow.
type of pressures.
So I mean, sometimes it's revealed is in the world, isn't it? You know, I notice as a coach, people will say, "Oh, I feel held back by life or held back by my dad."
Yes, those
And you
types
go,
of
right, let's play with
expressions.
that. Let's play with holding someone back and
Exactly,
you sort of
exactly.
somatize it, like make it come through the body
Yeah,
until
so it becomes like this. So if I work online, of course, I cannot do it in this way. But if I literally step, I call it coaching. I often now call co-aching. So I step into what is aching them and actually try to enter that image with them, either through a conversation or through a movement situation that I create, then suddenly we go from a flat language-based problem to more of a 3D situation. And then you can navigate. Then it's easier to see problems, or it's easier to actually take and make an action and try something with your body. And that I see actually does lead to change, because that's something I was thinking of after a while is, are we just creating like a nice feeling in people with this physical work or somatic work, and can they kind of regulate themselves? Or can we find a way that really gets to the root of what is recreating those symptoms that they verbalize in language, and have a true change? Like I was asking myself, does it really lead to anything, or are we just entertaining ourselves with movement and with relaxation methods, but we're actually not making the shift? So I find that using the image really is something that is of great benefit to me, to get very close to the person's actual inner life.
And that question, are we really creating a change? And if you go back to something you said before, often, I was swimming today, I was in the gym yesterday. When I go do sort of conventional kind of exercise modalities,
Yeah.
I see people drawn to them as if they know there's something there. And then often after a certain point, they're like questioning, why am I getting up at 7 a.m. to go swimming? Why am
Yes.
I
Yes.
going to, like I've got some muscles. And sometimes the questioning starts physically, like, okay, well, I'm strong, but maybe actually movement's more important to me. One thing
Mhm.
I've returned to kind of more movement stuff lately after having gone through a sort of muscle building period. And is it just that I'm pumping my state while I'm in there because it feels
Yeah.
good to hit the endorphins? And that's not bad. It's nice to de-stress, it's one
Mhm.
of the best things for your stress, whatever. But even saying about stress is like, okay, why am I really in here? It's not really about the muscles, it's because I want to be happier. And then I hear so many people in the mainstream health and fitness space, even like the real bro influencers, talk about the benefit of discipline and confidence
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like how they learned so many lessons in the gym, but they don't have a paradigm for that. They still go back to, but what? Let's talk about how many sets and reps for side lateral delts.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
seems like there's this longing for more.
Yes, and I
But
think this is what I felt when I started the gym at I was 21 or 22 starting a gym, so I was, you could say, too fresh to start that. But that's what I quickly realized, is these people are all, and me included, are all trying to get to some kind of inner longing through hard style training and pushing and ring training and like lots of building our body. So this kind of mechanistic industrial, I'm building myself, I'm pushing myself to my limit. But then I started seeing, like, talking to people or getting to know people's histories a little bit, like that guy with his huge chest, that's actually his problem, is that he's creating such a big shield. But maybe this guy he wants to be a bit less defensive, but he needed to be defensive because that's what his home
I mean,
situation was
how
like.
many bodybuilders do you know who don't have insecurities?
Yes,
Like,
of course, but that's why
martial
I was.
artists,
Yes,
like I
but
just
all of
saw a
us.
beautiful clip recently of Sean Strickland. Of people that don't know, he's a very rough, working class, provocative, and he's a cage fighting champion. He's one of the current UFC champions, which is like top of the game. And
Yeah.
he was on a podcast and he started talking about his abusive childhood and he kind of broke down in tears.
Yeah.
And it's actually a beautiful moment. The podcast host, who's a comedian from the Deep South, just actually beautifully held it. It was a really lovely moment, actually. Really kudos to
And
Theo.
that's, I think, what they also missed. So that's what I
Right.
felt I was trying to create also with that gym, because I tried to create a gym there that was not just about disciplining yourself, but also an inner discipline, like a discipline towards your, you could say, true self, or who you really are in essence. And at some point I realized I needed to give up my body. Like, I had built this, you could say, this beautifully orchestrated body. Like, I looked like a bit like a gymnast, and I had many people training with me probably because I looked like that and I could do certain things. And then I think last year I shared something about once I got in shape, but it was not mine, so I moved. And I posted a clip of where I did a one arm chin up and I looked very fit and strong. You could say that's a nice goal, an admirable goal for a young man to look like that. And one of my old clients of that gym told me, like, we all of us, we didn't understand why you gave up that beautiful body, like why you stopped training that, and
You're
why
like,
you kind of you allowed yourself to decay, kind of, is what he said.
yeah,
Like, it
because
lost its meaning for me. I
and also,
realized what I was doing.
I mean, you have to get laid for your personality now, you know. It's a whole different ball game when you can't get girls for your body. But
Yeah, maybe it was also related because then I got my
your
future
current
wife as a
partner,
girlfriend. So
but
maybe I was like, now I can slack.
it's a huge amount of work. I mean, I look at there's a someone I see is always in the gym when I go, and they're putting hours in a day to try and achieve this body. And as you say, it has this kind of industrial frame of I want to. It's a thing that someone else has said should look good, and this is what success looks like. And then I separate that. How can I separate that out from? On the one hand, like I'm not interested in aesthetics because
Yeah,
on the mainstream is very like aesthetics are all that matter, even if you're killing yourself with steroids or spending 10 hours a day in there. But then on the
yeah.
counterculture, on the other hand, is saying, aesthetics don't matter at all. We're not into aesthetics, it's all spiritual. And that's often bullshit because you see the same stuff coming out in yoga of looking a certain way or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it does feel like aesthetics needs to have some due, but without giving it kind of the full dedication and the suffering that comes with that.
I agree, and I think my tendency is then to go to the complete other side and like completely go into the more yin light receptive aspects of practice. I went very much into the meditative or inner martial arts practices, and now I'm trying to balance in between, but finding a way or a dosage of practices or a combination that fits my constitution and is not somehow a way of living up to an ideal or like this
Mhm.
Peterson style 12 rules for I completely dislike that approach.
Because it's top
It
down, because it's like an impost.
Yes, it can give some support initially, I think, in the first steps of taking these pathways of getting closer to yourself. But I think it's only for a while that can be it's not a complete form. For me, it's about like this T.S. Eliot line of like we will never cease exploring. Like for me, this is something good teaching should teach you, is that in the end you should be the one exploring and being surprised about who you are, because you just never define yourself. You keep some space open always for unknown investigation.
Right. No, that makes sense. And we could go to two extremes here, couldn't we? Because sometimes rules are very helpful, like the 12 steps were very helpful for me in sobriety. Having some hard rules about my tech use has really helped me kind of get more embodied by being on my phone less. Okay, after
Hmm.
9, like very set lines can be very helpful. But then simultaneously, I sort of, if I'm in the gym even and I see someone with their little notepad of their routine, 3 sets of 12, I mean, for me, that makes no sense because it's like, well, what if 13 feels better today? And what if the third set, I'm actually kind of mourning the grief of my breakup. So the third set feels a bit much and then just 2 sets is
Yeah,
fine, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like the 2 sets of 12 is actually insane because it's like, if 12 is the right number for the first set, it will be the wrong number for the third set and vice versa.
Exactly. Yeah,
And like there's got to be some can they call it they call it auto regulation in the sort of gym bro world
yeah,
where you're
yeah.
going, okay, what exercises feel good? Like that one, you know what? Like just even on a physical level, like overhead triceps feels like it's hurting my elbow more than tricep push down. So
Mhm.
obviously I'm not going to do the one that feels like it's damaging my elbows.
Yeah, and I think that word auto-regulation by itself, like we can say that word very quickly, but that is a deep skill. Like today I had a session with somebody who we worked often around this topic of one time 100 reps is not the same as 100 times one rep. So this presence within repetitions, but also within maybe the first two repetition of a certain we were doing coordinations with the arms. Maybe the first two repetitions your body is somehow resisting a bit, or there is a tension in your chest from what went on in the morning or the past day. So it's there, so it needs to be considered. But after two gentle repetitions being present to that tension in the chest and the throat, suddenly that tension is like, well, okay, let's go a bit further, and your body wants more, and your like your fascial system becomes a bit more buttery, like it's okay with it. But then you overstepped yourself a bit again, and then you go. So this inner regulation, often we just use that word, but for me it's an actual skill that I see is very needed, both in sports, in business. I went to some corporate workshops, and there it's often about can we teach those skills to people who are often living in a kind of restless state that maybe don't even notice that they are overriding certain inner frictions? Can we
Yeah,
teach them in such a way that they are feeling safe to slow down slightly, where they could actually realize that that is going on?
because as you say, auto-regulation. I mean, first of all, the paradigm is like you got to regulate yourself, but it's really about listening. And there's
Yeah.
levels of subtlety. Like someone in a corporate stress environment, it's a win to even get like, "Hey, I'm not hungry now," or "Hey, I
Hmm.
need to sleep a bit more." Like
Yeah.
that's a win,
Yeah.
right? And then there's kind of like more subtle layers of intuition and
Yeah.
kind of. I guess we keep coming back to, and I want to kind of keep pressing on this, like this idea of like why train. Like, let's go back to sports, right? You're working with basketball with young people.
Yeah.
Western cultures have had sports for a long time. It seems like when they were first invented, they were done as a personal growth practice, almost like a Budo, when rugby and football, obviously the British invented most of the sports. When they were invented as a sort of public school personal growth system, kind of like the Japanese would see martial arts, not as fighting arts, but as Budo. And then that sort of gotten lost over the years somehow, and they become more about winning, performance, something else.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then it reemerges in, say, extreme sports or surfing.
Yeah.
And then the surfing gets kind of co-opted and it becomes a performance thing. And then there's surf championships and then Instagram for surfing. And then it's a way
Yeah.
to earn a
Yeah.
living through cool video clips on Instagram.
Exactly.
It's like this sort of idea of sports as personal growth emerges and then decays, emerges and then decays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been in that field for 12 years, and then I went also to a high level of like MBA camps and like the top prospects, uh, coaching them in like little workshops and warming them up. And so on the one hand, it's a beautiful field, but on the other hand, it also destroys many young minds where they, because it's a very short term occupation. You could say maybe you're a professional athlete until you're 35, or you've been training your whole youth, and then at 18 or 20 you realize, well, it's not going to happen, so I'm a failure. But so that's why I was interested when I had so I started a basketball academy like 7, 8 years ago, where the main um, message was about, can we develop qualities through sport that might also be transferable
Great.
to becoming a manager, or to becoming a lawyer or a doctor, or an artist, or anything else that is not within that specific format of the sport? Can we get to the essence of learning about communication, learning about who you are, learning about your limits, learning about, I can actually push a bit more, or I should hold back a little bit more? These are for me the beautiful qualities in sport, but often they are suppressed in favor of pushing yourself, overriding your own limits, and
Well,
comparing yourself, winning or losing only.
this has, in a way, been the central question of my life. I did my dissertation on the psychology of Aikido when I was 20 years old, and it was how to get Aikido off the mat, right?
Yeah,
Because everybody says, "Oh yeah, martial arts is great for your life," but then when you ask people, "Okay, how do you do that?"
yeah,
Or how do you maximize that if we're maximizing that and not say competitive results? We're not maximizing whether our school wins the basketball championship this year or not. And most people I don't think have a good answer to that. Like there's sort of some sense that it sort of magically happens if you
exactly. Yeah.
if you do basketball or do Aikido or anything. Oh, it sort of magically helps your life. But what's your paradigm for how to maximize that? Even that word's a little industrial. What would be your focus in order to, if that was truly the reason to do basketball or anything else?
Yeah, for me, that's why I rephrased my role from performance coach or athletic development coach to play perform coach, because I saw that if you look at the best performers in any discipline, they look playful, they look effortless, they have this quality of, in Italian they have a word, sprezzatura, which is like this nonchalance that took decades to develop.
That
And
was a
that for
Greek virtue as well. The Greek virtue, which basically translates as sort of not giving a shit. But
yeah.
it's considered a sort of high level spiritual version of that, you know.
Yeah. So it's not like not giving a shit on a low level like a beginner, but it's a trained way of not giving a shit. It took a long time, and for me, I love that quality. But what I see is that so many kids are dealing with perfectionism, are dealing with comparing themselves, not feeling good enough, holding a lot of tension. We can talk about like all the attention deficits and all of that. So through sports, lots of behavioral patterns are revealed, just the way that I use movement games to reveal patterns in people that are just interested in movement but not in sports per se. So that which is revealed for me is the material to work on. So whether it's a physical skill to improve or a behavioral tendency of holding back when it gets tense in the game, that then becomes material to train. So the kids can become better within that trigger. So I use the triggers, like the emotional mental triggers, just as well as the physical training as part of the development program. And then for me, physical education or physical literacy through sports, it expands. Then I also, as a coach, stay interested because it's a never-ending refining that we can be doing there, and it's not just about pushing them into one direction, making copies of copies of copies like an industry. It's about each individual within that web of a team. Um, Developing together, and that's more of an organic thing. That's much more individual. It's much more tiring because it's not one one method that you can
Back
use.
to line. Yeah.
But all of the material that comes up for me, so I was training the I try to change, work on the mental game through movement, through games, while staying on the move, not just doing your training and then next to it we can have a talk and what is difficult for you, but trying to move through it, creating a safe learning environment, not just on the level of physical sports skills, but expanding that slightly. But this needs, of course, lots of trust and um, yeah. But that my paradigm is more such a paradigm that all of which comes up, or all of that is difficult in a game, needs to be included in the cup of the practice environment.
No, so there's the fact that the practice environment will reveal certain patterns, you know, whether that be a coaching setup, I feel pushed, I feel pulled,
Yeah.
whether that, you know, it could be fairly non-athletic, or whether that be, you know, basketball drill or, you know, within a weights room or whatever. And then we can develop those patterns. We can examine them. Do you think to maximize this transfer, we need to reflect? Like, is there a process where the physical has to become kind of conscious and verbal? Like, for example, like, hey, doing a debrief after an Aikido class, like, hey, what came up there? What were you working on? What did you notice? Or do you think it's enough simply to like put it through the body and kind of change the embodiment?
I think it depends on the person, but I've seen it as beneficial for some players, for some kids also, or for some adults that I work with, to reflect on what we've just done, so they can also kind of recap it in their words, kind of like save it in their memory bank based on what makes sense to them. Because not, some react more on the physical, some react more on the verbal, some more need lots of visuals or need a presentation too, or
Yeah.
needs videos of another player and to see that quality in them revealed. So I believe it depends on each individual, but feedbacking after a session is something I do very often. Also in the non-sports environments, is to just sit in a circle and ask like, okay, what did we do today? And then often you hear like 20 different or you hear somebody, why were we doing like this branching practice that we do in fighting monkeys sometimes, so the standing with the arms open. Somebody would ask, why are we doing this? And then I would ask, well, let's ask the group. And then you have like 10 different answers of why that was meaningful or what they learned from it. And I think that feedbacking round, or that sharing what your specific experience was, that is an essential part. And that also takes out the authoritarian role of the teacher, kind of.
Right, right. So you won't get a straight answer from the fighting monkey people normally when you ask them why you do anything. But it enables self-discovery and takes out some of the authority issues. I used to notice as an Aikido class I used to go to every Sunday in Brighton. I used to walk home with my friend, and that little chat on the way home was
Mm-hmm.
often where a lot of the learning really landed. We said, oh, how was your class? And what did you learn? And
Yeah.
what were you working on? And it strikes me intentionality is another key piece here, though, right? Like, what are we trying to learn? Like, am I going to the gym to try and get a big chest, or am I going to the gym to work on my discipline or to work on my, like, what I'm working on, for example, at the moment in the gym is not going to failure. So I
Yeah.
learned this concept in strength training called failure. And it turned out that I was doing every single set to absolute failure. And I had no idea there was an alternative. I just thought that's what you did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that means when you physically can't do any more, and where most people think their failure point is, it's several reps shy. And now my practice is stopping with a couple of reps in
Yeah.
reserve, which
And
for
that's a
someone like
great
me,
quality to you to also transfer to probably other
exactly.
domains.
You know what? I don't need to push everything to the max, like,
Yeah.
and so it's a hell of a process. I'm like, I could do two more, but I'm like, no, that's two iron reps in reverse. That's where we stop. But there's an intentionality for that for me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it'd be easy to just do these things without an intentionality of transfer, let's call that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that brings us to qualities. Like one question I often get is about how to stay consistent, for example, with a practice. Like many people know many tools, even like people who have been very well educated or been to many workshops or have done lots of coaching, they know what to do. They know many tools to check in or kind of cultivate certain physical technical skills. But then how to keep that up? And then I feel those, if you have certain qualities you would like to develop and have present to you in your daily life, in the way that you run your household or your business or how you communicate in relationships and all that, and you can kind of physicalize those qualities in movements, then I feel it that it's almost like you're doing some kind of movement prayer or some movement affirmations. So you're downloading in your system the ability to stop before you've reached your boundaries of your maximal stretch, for example, or you're trying to integrate an effortlessness, or you're learning to listen more than talk in a conversation. So you're learning to listen more than trying to change the tension that you have in your body, and suddenly that might transform because you are more in acceptance mode. So I feel those qualities that are important to you, if you can kind of interweave them in the things you're
Yes.
practicing physically, then that whole telos, that long-term intention that you see on how you would like to be in life, that kind of gets supported through those movements, so that movement stays in a rhythm.
That strikes me that that's an embodiment perspective, which is the nice word is quality. What quality am I building through this practice? Because
Yeah,
that's becoming part of myself. And
yeah.
and that's what to me is missing when people are really trying to understand a lot of sports and martial arts is
Mm-hmm.
just that paradigm of, yes, we could talk about skill acquisition. Like, I was teaching someone about stress management yesterday in a coaching session. They're like, hey, I get stressed with my wife. What do I do about that? I'm like, well, you need to deliberately get stressed in your body and then learn to manage that. And he's like, well, how do I do that? And I said, well, you could, do a yoga pose every day. And he'd never made that link, even though he'd done yoga for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yoga is a stress management tool where you're learning a skill of handling intensity, or, it could be cold showers or
Yeah,
whatever. I was listening to Huberman earlier, and he was talking about, learning the skill of stress management kind of thing. But he's not in an embodiment paradigm. That's still a skill acquisition paradigm. Like,
yeah,
I've never
yeah.
heard Huberman talk about developing a quality of being through practice.
Mm-hmm.
That strikes me as a complementary. You could do both, but a sort of deeper, better paradigm to be in than simply making them aware of a pattern through the basketball class, which is great, and I'm developing a skill through the basketball class, which they can transfer, which is great. But there's a being level, which I think's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
more significant one.
Yeah, I feel that that's the fountain. Like that's where you get to return to a state of choice rather than being taken by the old stories or the old behavioral automatic triggered reactions. But even though still you might get triggered and you might see yourself getting defensive or angry or like retreating, that element of seeing that you are doing that I feel starts to grow with practice. Is you realize, I'm doing it again, and I've told myself in my journaling that I wanted to change that pattern, and now I see I'm doing it, and I realize the tension is quite strong in my face, or it's again in my chest, and I know this so well, but still there is this buffer. It's not like you can immediately always snap out of it, but there is that movement, and that inner movement of return to that being mode that you describe. This, I feel, is what we are in essence trying to transmit, or that many people are longing for, maybe through their initially bench pressing and pulling themselves up and throwing something away, or being pulled back and pushing against it, but feeling, how can I do this more effortlessly? And how then can I integrate that quality of return to an inner, like the Stoics talk about an inner citadel, like an inner place where I can choose how to act now. But the thing why I like to work with the body is that there is still that kind of nervous system activation that doesn't let go immediately. If it took you 20, 30 years to get tense about that and become defensive and retreat, then you will not change that by doing 2 months of yoga classes or learning a breathing technique. There needs to be a deeper meaning. There needs to be a deep willingness to change, and a belief also that change is possible. But it's gonna come from, not from the technique or the breathing exercise. Is gonna come because you really, really want to be like that. But it's just taking some time to metamorphosize to that new state.
That aspirational evolutionary impulse of to become something bigger, better, stronger, wider, whatever it is, that I think is really key. And let's another way into this is sometimes people tell me, Olivier, they say, I'm working on it. Oh, that's something I'm working on. And they're not. What they normally mean is I have some self-awareness that I have a pattern. Let's say it's bad boundaries. And occasionally I think about it or read a book about it or watch a video about it. And quite often I feel bad when I notice that I'm not doing it and I beat myself up a bit.
Yeah.
But they're not actually working on it. They're simply aware of it and they're sort of feeling bad about the fact that they have a tendency they'd rather not have. And when they say I'm working on it, I'll say, great, get out your diary, show me where you're working on it, at what point in the day. And normally I'm met with complete like, what? Because they don't actually mean they're working on it.
Yeah, I know what you. Yeah, it needs to be part of your really deeply rooted willingness to purify from your bed of good intentions for yourself, but also for the people you're with, that you want to get on this path of inner work through the door of the body, for example. But working on it to me often means that you know that there are those tools, and you watched and you listened to the podcast, and you watched some workshops, and you have read some books, but the work is an inner movement. It's a return journey, like Joseph of Fighting Monkey often calls it. You return to that place where you can start to create new constructive habitual ways of being, and you believe in becoming, but you realize that you need to be the one that holds yourself there and stops, creates an inner stop when you want to go and do that old pattern again and tweak it a bit. So one example was, I was working with kids, and I have all these nice intentions of being a play perform coach and all that. And one of the kids was standing there looking around at the ceiling and not listening at all. So I go to him. I call him Fred when I talk about him hypothetically. So I go to him and I want to tell him, like, can you please be present, like an authoritarian coach? And I stop and I say, you are an artist, right? And he's like, what do you mean? And he was feeling like awkward about the question. I'm like, well, you're always seeing things that nobody else is seeing. I'm talking and you're like looking at the ceiling, so you're probably seeing something there or imagining something. And so we opened a conversation, and then afterwards we became really, like, he was 14, we became really great friends. I wrote an article about it, using Fred as a name. But for me, that was where I have a concrete memory of using an inhibition to change a pattern that automatically wants to come when I'm a coach, is like being the instructor and yelling them and telling them what they need to do. But I believe that through connection we can reach more. So I had to stop myself. And so that's what suddenly came in my head, like, tell him he's an artist. And so I said, oh, you're an artist, right? And that broke that potential conflict open into a connection. And we could talk about it then. We could talk about why he was doing that and why was I not interested. So that inner inhibition, I think, is an important movement that we need to learn. And the tools can create the inhibition, but it's not about mindlessly doing tools.
Just gonna have to answer the door. Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, slight change of track. So you're part of this
Yes.
movement culture. I had Stefan Craik, is it on recently from Romanian, is based in Berlin. I like very much. And you mentioned Fighting Monkey. I've got some friends in Amsterdam who are super into this. It seems like every city in Europe, there's one or two people who love movement, obsessed with sort of free movement. It's become a whole thing. I mean, in my lifetime, in the last 10 years, I think it was Ido Patel, and then
Yeah.
people got sick of him and realized that the Fighting Monkey people were kind of a bit more holistic, maybe,
Yeah.
nicer to play with. Rafe Kelly obviously doing good stuff as well, various other people, but it's become a whole movement, right?
Yeah, like the movement thing has become a movement, and I also see that it is moving, it is expanding. So for me, how I started was I was in this rather more traditional paradigm of strength training and performance training for sports. But then I went into more of the like all of the handstand guys. I also did coaching with Ido Portal. I went to his movement camp. So the nice thing was that I had a gym, so I could organize workshops for free and host people there
Nice.
to get to know from many of these guys that were on the social media. Sharing their material, so I could learn from Yuval doing handstands, from Yuri Marmerstein we had, the FRC guys who were more like
What's that?
tight
What's
about
that?
it. Like, so I could learn about all those different approaches, but I realized I was interested in who has the most nourishing philosophy, like who is looking at life the way that I would like to poetically, philosophically look at it. Like who do I connect with? And then I had Joseph Rusek there with I think Lubo was there. He was a special forces friend of Joseph, and they were bringing this. I couldn't understand it initially. They were combining so many things. He was giving lectures during the session talking about quantum physics connected to Taoism, and then Kung Fu Panda, and then martial arts. Like he was combining so many things that I was like, this is not allowed. He's combining too much in one cup, but still he did it, and he was like a child playing as he wanted. And then one thing I remember why I wanted to study with him is he was doing this branching practice, so standing there with a group of 55 people in a too small of a gym, like on a half basketball court. And many of the like the known guys now on social media in the movement culture were there, all suffering, like huffing and puffing with their chest, not knowing how to realize with just holding up their arms. So we kind of found something to pull everybody out of there. I'm so impressive and awesome with my ring
It's great,
routines and
just
all.
for anyone listening. I did this once. It's a very simple practice where you basically hold your arms up to the side, and it becomes kind of a sort of mind game more than anything,
Yeah,
right? And people
yeah.
with like strong physiques can't
Yeah,
always.
mind game, but also like physically, like which shoulder is coming up and can you relax? Like how many times can you let go of it again? So we are all like they're experts in the body, and he just does this simple thing. And while doing it, he said something. He said, how do you react physically, but also mentally and emotionally to pressure in your life? And I was like, okay, I want to learn from him, because now he connected what we were trying to do in the gym to everything else in life. He opened the pot. And so I kept going to the workshops for many years, because I was just so intrigued about how he's creating this map that is never, you could say like that quote, the map is never the territory, but still he decided to map. And that quality of his minds, that's what really inspired me above anything else. That kind of attitude of let's go at it anyway. Let's see how many things we can combine, because it has meaning for you as an individual. And so my map is going to look a bit different than his, but he taught me about that attitude of the explorer, you could say.
Yeah, I went to one of his workshops in Berlin, and part of me was, first of all, he seems like a genius, but he's far too Taoist for my tastes. Slippery, hard to get hold of. I interviewed him, and it's like it's difficult to get a straight answer, but very interesting answers. Certainly an intelligent
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
And I went to one of his workshops, and I was always sort of like, "What's the point?" You know, I wasn't quite sure, like, why are we doing this? And it seemed very abstract, and some of it sometimes, they have these gimmicky toys and great visuals as well, really good photography and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Seems like a new, like a speed toy one week, and then a new other toy another week, and
Yeah, but you need to know, like, many of those tools, they were developed over many, many years, or they were, I actually got to meet them in a dance school in Brussels in parts, where I entered because an ex-student still knew the code of that building. So she was like, I know the people that you're interested in, and they're actually now in Brussels. Let's go to them. They were teaching that with like um, tennis balls with duct tape on it and rope. So it started very experimental, and now it has, of course, like more of a formalized shape. But it started from that drive of questioning and just trying
yeah,
and
genuine exploration. I don't
yeah.
say that like I'd happily have Joseph back on the show. Like it reminded me, I might message him actually afterwards. Real genuine exploring. Where do you think it's going, this kind of movement culture? Like there's now sort of movement centers, and I've been thinking about starting a little movement class myself just because I want to practice. And it's like that's probably the thing that I most want to do in terms of I'm not interested in doing one-handed handstands, but just in kind of keeping keeping my movement or my abilities as I get older.
Yeah.
Where do you think it's heading, this scene?
For me, it connects to, there is this short documentary that was released in the COVID period, in the lockdowns, something about Strasbourg, of Jonathan Glazer. And it was people suddenly getting the urge to start dancing on the streets, in the whole city of Strasbourg. There was some story that people just intuitively started to need to move, as if, like in Reichian words, their body armor wanted to melt, like some inner impulse came. And I think this for me is what movement is about, is there is something in you that wants to move, and there are layers, barriers, social ways of conditioning that are in your body, in your mind, in your ways of thinking, and it's enough. It becomes so clear that on a social, political, cultural level, things are off, and you have adapted yourself to it, and you've locked your being, but you just realize, and the body is the way out. The body is one of the ways that can help you to get rid of that actual tension that you don't want to keep going anymore, that weight in your backpack that just has to be flushed. So I think that's where it goes as a movement. I think it can have many forms, like movement centers, sessions, as many movements have had before. But I feel that on a cultural level, on a societal level, there are more and more people realizing
Mhm.
that something needs to shift or wants to move in them, and they're ready for it. They're not linking themselves too much anymore to the old paradigm.
Nice, nice. I was talking to Stefan about this, so I like very much actually. Everyone should listen to Stefan's episode if they like this one. And he was we talked to him about social media because I just blown up on Instagram. We've started doing 1 minute coaching demos, which is completely ridiculous. And I don't think anyone else in the world could do it, but I'm pretty fast and I primed them and we managed to make it work. And now I'm kind of going, oh, now I need to have 1 minute demos more. And I'm kind of like, is this influencing what I'm going to teach? And I also see in movement culture people doing things that are kind of flashy, that are kind of cool, doing a one-handed handstand. Do you think the sort of visual representation of movement culture impacts where it might be going?
Yeah, I think it has both. It has two. Uh, it can open the door to people who are new and who are attracted to more of the entertaining side, or the concrete side of skill building. And I think it is a task of all of us to communicate much better what we are really doing. And maybe that can start with, I can teach you to do this, but it can also be like, I can teach you through this, through the physical work, to create, as you said, attention, where we can have a simulation on how you currently react in your relationship in a too offensive way, and you would like to morph that a little bit. And by training that through the body frequently, after some months or weeks or days, there might be a shift in your behavior. What would that be like in your daily life if you could postpone that automatic reaction? So I think we need to communicate very, very clearly on like that first, if people come to the gym in the beginning with me, they came to lose fat and to gain weight, to gain muscle, you could say. If I say, well, I don't do that, I only do like the holy stuff, like I only
Yeah.
bring you back to your being. Uh, I was like that for a while, and that didn't
Yeah.
work well. Um, I think we need to create content material to communicate on all of those stairs on the staircase.
Right.
And I think social media is great and low cost for that. But on the other hand, what also happens is that suddenly people all over the world start moving in the same way and start doing the same tricks and get stuck in the tricks. And then practice itself can again be something that also becomes a layer of tension or limitation on your unfolding instead of something that can bring yourself deeper to who you actually are.
Nice. Let's talk about nonsense. So you talked about play earlier. Often things in the Western world are very goal directed. You know, what am I going to get if I do this set of, twists or this set of bicep curls? Like nonsense and play. I'd love to hear you talk a bit. It seems like from what I've seen of your work, that looks like a real strength. So
Yeah, so I believe like there is this Russian absurdist poet Daniel Harms who says all I'm interested in is nonsense. But if you look at what was where sense was made from was nonsense. Like if you look at basketball makes sense, but if you look at the guy that invented basketball, he just put up a basket, like a basket where you put in fruits maybe, and then you start throwing some paper maybe in there and you make a ball of the paper, and so it started from that initial impulse and now it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and we say, well,
right.
basketball makes sense, but throwing that mushy ball into a fruit basket, that doesn't make sense. But it was started from nonsense. So what I see with people that come to me for coaching, for example, I do this performance coaching, and that's often people that are already performing quite well in sports or in business or something, and they often got bored. So they often exploited their one skill or
Yes.
their one product, but they got bored with it and they actually want to explore more. But that which they exploited so financially well, or like they're known as that professional sportsman now, it started from play, from nonsense, from going to the playground. So I think that quality we want to keep, that makes us bubbly, and it doesn't need to be for anything. We don't need to be we don't need to make money. Like kids don't want to make money or want to make a good impression always from what they create. They just play, but then at some point we get a thumbs up or a
Yeah.
heart, and then we start to do for the heart and for the thumbs up and for the euros.
I've already found that with these videos we've been making. Like we just did the first one for fun. I was just like, let's see if I can coach someone in 1 minute. Fuck it, you know? And it's like just for a challenge and a bit of fun, a bit silly. And then it's amazing how quickly that greed comes in, for status, for likes, for money.
Yeah, yeah.
Really,
Then you
really.
get one success, and then you want to recreate, like, you want to recreate it. But I like this story. There was this old woman who was an artist who never sold, but she always kept her old paintings. And then at some point, somebody got interested in one of her paintings, like a person with a large network. And then that person bought one of those paintings. And then he recommended it to his friends. And then she said, oh, I made something else. And she sold that. But she was just always creating. Her creative flow was always open because she never got successful. But then at the end, she got successful and she already got everything created. But she didn't have to create that one painting and then recreate it like a machine,
Yeah.
because she didn't live for that approval of the buyer.
And also, I think it's the way in which sort of productivity even tries to take play and says, okay, Google Friday afternoons, it's playtime, just work on your projects. But really, they're still trying to generate income. Like,
Yeah,
and then
that
it
that
becomes just play for the sake of, okay, this is going to make some idea we can sell. And then it
yeah.
sort of loses its heart and it stops being the real deal at that point.
I agree. Then it again becomes image. That's why I didn't want to go to businesses to teach this material for a long time, because I felt like am I here because they're actually interested, or am I here because it's a nice image building for their HR department? And it's like a checkbox of we did sustainable well-being stuff for our employees. So then it's often,
Yes.
if the manager is already into this kind of stuff, then it's easier to really go to the real stuff, the real stuff, the actual nonsense, you could say, instead of making it packages that are easy to sell.
Many times I've been brought in to do a stress workshop so they could exploit people more, you know, and I kind of thought, you know what, and I'm not sure I want to be part of
I've seen it very,
it.
very
This is not my idea.
close by.
Listen, before we wrap up, there's one phrase in the notes you sent me. Thanks for these; they've been useful. Which is image hygiene and intermittent image fasting. What does that mean? I was super curious about that.
Yeah, for me, that's about like your relationship to social media, or like if I look at I've been writing my dreams for 6, 7 years, and what I see is the influence of imagery that I consume during the day has influence on the dream printouts I get in the morning. So I want to get closer and closer to myself, you could say, with all of this work. But then I fill myself up with these flashes of crap of thousands of, like, I just need to open it and it just starts, it's like I start eating automatically, but then with the images. So image hygiene for me is about the choice of how you relate to your smartphone and your laptop and all that, for example, and how you decide for 16 hours a day, I don't consume any images, or for 24 to 48 hours, I say no to all of that, or I follow no one anymore. I just remove everybody from my lists. And then I follow some people again after a while, but keeping my image consumption clean for periods of time, so I can actually distinguish between direct personal experience and that which was consumed and like propagated by others on the social media channels.
Yeah, the same with ideas. You know, I find myself consuming like high level ideas from the moment I wake up in the morning sometimes. And
Yeah,
I'm very lucky who I get to speak to on the podcast, you know, the books on my shelf. And I just find myself just idea gorged
yeah,
without having enough time to digest it all. And then it's like I've got no ideas of my own because I'm just still trying to digest.
exactly. So for me, it's about this like sensory deprivation tank, you could say, with images. Like instead, you're just floating a bit in your own well of what is coming up, instead of choosing to consume actively on those channel that will gladly just yell at your face.
Okay, well, let's tell people where to find you on Instagram after that and website and elsewhere. There you are. I've got you. I'm just making sure I follow you. I do on the Instagram. So yeah, where do people find your website and your stuff?
Well, my website is oliviergoedgeluk.com. Don't listen to your pronunciation. You'll never find it. And my Instagram is Goedgeluk, just my last name. Yeah,
That's
that's the best
G O
place to find me.
G Goetgeluk.
Yes,
Great. Okay,
exactly.
best place to find you. Good, sir. A real pleasure. The time's flown by. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.